I mean, this session is about, probably from what I've seen in startups, probably it's one of the most important elements of a successful startup, because you can have the people, you can have a good idea, but if you don't have the funding, you will make either bad decisions or you'll go out of business because of cash flow very quickly. So the funding element is important, and I talked about earlier about Ireland being behind the curve probably in AgTech, and part of that is because of looking at funding, and particularly in America and that. But the good news is that America are looking at us now, and we have actually different accelerators and the accelerator model coming in. We'll talk about that. We have different venture capital funds coming in, and I think as well we might be able to get our banks interested as well, because I think this is in the interest. So we have the money coming in, it's starting to flow. The question is, are we good enough to get it, because they don't give it away easily either. I'm going to start firstly with, I suppose, what we've followed in the journal and followed over the last few years is Fabian with HerdWatch, and Farm Relief Services have developed that, and he's going to talk really, I suppose, about the challenges, but also sometimes an disadvantage not having too much money, because you have to think differently as well, and he's pretty good at getting PR and all that, so I know that. So I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit about the funding challenges for him, and also looking into the future a little bit.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm going to try and be as brief as, I'm going to try and be as hello? Is this on, is it? Yeah. Try and be as brief. No, I don't think it is. Okay, sorry now. Okay, is that better, yeah? So I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. I want to hear some of the other members of the panel have to say, and also I'm looking forward to the next session, which is actually farmers telling us what different technology makes on a day-to-day basis. But just to give you a brief story of HerdWatch, which is, most of you will probably know at this stage, it's an app. It's used by over 5,500 farmers in Ireland, and essentially what it does is it helps them reduce the time they spend on compliance related issues, and also gives them information in their hand that they can use to make decisions on the farm within seconds, rather than having to go back to paper, book and paper. HerdWatch was born, I suppose, out of an idea, as Peter mentioned, about 6 years ago maybe at this stage, and for us, the story of HerdWatch is also the story of being backed by farmers themselves. I was lucky enough to even at that time already be part of an organisation called FRS, Farm Relief Services, and while I came up with the idea and the concept, I had to get someone to partner with to help me put it into reality. And I approached Peter Byrne, who's the CEO of FRS Network, and he backed the idea and me from the start. And I fast forward a little bit, 5 years later, here we are. But what that meant was that they provided, I suppose, seed capital, and also management and advisory services. Any company needs people who understand accounts, people who understand finance, people who understand business plans and things like that. It's one thing having an idea, it's another kind of putting it into practice. Along the way, we also got some very crucial help from the likes of the local enterprise office here in Tipperary, in the form of a grant and an interest-free loan. While looking back, the amounts, I suppose, if you look at the business we're doing now, are relatively small, but they were at a crucial point in the history of HerdWatch, and they really helped us get to the next stage. And going back a little bit further, even to the the North Tip Leader Partnership, who also gave us a grant at the time to build a prototype. So all I want to say is, it's not necessarily all about venture capitalists. You can actually do stuff without resorting to those people, even though they are extremely useful and extremely wealthy, and they can take you places. You can also do things by, going locally to people who have funds available and help available. So that's our story.
And about, getting a product for sale and getting money in as well, so it's not all going out all the time. I'll move over to Andrew Wood, and if you did read Andrew's bio, you'll see a successful entrepreneur. That means he's obviously sold a company somewhere along the way. But he's now coming back, and I met him recently at the Yield Lab Accelerator, where they got picked for an investment from a Yield Lab. So I might let him tell you a little bit about that. But I suppose I'll hand over to you, Andrew, just a little bit about funding and how you see it in your past experience and going forward as well.
Sure. So Andrew Wood, I'm chairman of APIS Protect. Can you hear me up there okay? No, let's try this one. How's that? Okay, good. So the APIS Protect is a system for assisting in the problem of bee pollination. They pollinate 1/3 of the world's crops, as you'll know, and bees are in trouble. I look after the commercialization and co-founder of a business that fixes that as a direct result of 3 years' worth of scientific trials at UCC. I guess I've had some success in the past of raising finance and of growing businesses. And so one of the first things that we set about doing was, is this a problem that we're solving, or is this a technology solution, a technology looking for a solution? So the first piece of advice I might lay upon you is to validate with customers, are you really fixing a problem? And that means go talk to customers, listen to what they have to say, and react accordingly. Once you've done that, you need to figure out what hill are you going to go and take over. Very often I see in some of the workshops I run at CIT on entrepreneurship, people come up with a great idea, and it really is a great idea, and they're full of passion and energy, and they're off taking that hill over there. But that's the wrong hill. That's the one they want to be taking over there. So build a plan. It doesn't have to be a big plan. It can be a single sheet of paper. In fact, I think you'll find most investors prefer that in the first analysis. But it needs to be really carefully thought through as to what hill you're going to take, why you're going to take it, who's going to benefit from it. And then you can start to build up the numbers that lead you to, hopefully, a successful business. And then you need to validate that. So build a 5-year plan. And then go talk to as many people as you can that can give you assistance. So we've heard about the LEOs, the local enterprise offices, Enterprise Island. You'll know from my accent, I'm not from around here. I can actually say that in Europe, this is one of the best countries in the world to start a business up. It's one of the worst in the world to get personal wealth out, but it's one of the best in the world to set it up. And the reason for that is Enterprise Island is fantastic at what they do. And if I directly contrast it, and if there's any Brits in the room, close your ears, with the Department of Trade and Industry in the UK, it walks over them. If you go into any Enterprise Island office, they will help you, and they will plug you into the right sort of support networks, and they will give you advice. So we managed to win an early award with Enterprise Island. Our founder, who's a PhD graduate from UCC, placed 3rd in the Young Entrepreneur of the Year competition, and that got us a lot of press and PR, which is also a good thing. And that took us on to the next stage, where we started networking around, big time, all of us. There were 4 of us, the co-founders in this business. And one of the events we went to was AgTech in January, where one of the speakers was a new entrant accelerator into the Irish agriculture technology marketplace, the Yield Lab. And I grabbed one of the speakers after he'd spoken, and so long as you get your message across very succinctly, they will listen to you. We got to pitch from 190 applicants, and we were gratefully recipients of one of the first 4 investments in Ireland of a significant 6-figure amount of money. So that gets us off and running. That gets us to the attention of Enterprise Island, and all of a sudden we're on their HPSU, High Performance Startup track, which is the ability to be able to, if you were able to prove yourself, to have match funding up to 250,000. So all of a sudden, from January, where we had a small amount of funding, which goes a long way, we've got to the point where we're looking at our first seed round being completed of $500,000 3 or 4 months in advance of where we planned it to be. Some general comments on the finance climate here in Ireland. I would say it's a small market. It's very difficult to find funding less than 1 million, but there's a reason for that, guys, which is that they want you to prove that you can succeed with very little resources. And Barry, of all people, would know that, I'm sure. If you don't get customer validation and people signing things saying, I want to pay money for it, then it hasn't been validated yet. So it is difficult anyway, but I think particularly difficult below 1 million in this country. Series A is a lot more targeted in this country, and there are a few very fine players in this market, which Barry represents, one of those organizations. So in summary, if I can close out, it's a fine place to start a business. There's a lot of help and assistance, and I'll take questions later.
Thanks very much. I think it gives a good starting point for discussion as well. It was interesting, actually. Went to the venture capital conference that's held every year, whatever, and it's interesting to get their view, because before, from the startup, they want money, and you made a comment, they're all very wealthy, but in their cases, they were getting the money from someone else, and if they didn't invest right, they get fired as well. So it was interesting that the reason why they weren't giving out, and they had to be sure, is they wanted to back winners. They know there's going to be losers, particularly with startups. There's going to be risk. Where there's not risk, there's no reward. So they have to get that balance right. So I suppose, Barry, from your point of view, you have money, you have a fund. Firstly, where did it come from? What do you have to, what is your idea of success in terms of return to the people you got it for? And then basically looking at the other side for startups, or how are you going to give it out and monitor it?
Right. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? Fabulous. So our fund is called Sure Valley Ventures. We're brand new. We launched in March of this year, and we're based out of Waterford and also out of London, and we're shortly going to open an office in Dublin as well. And Peter, to answer the question, you're absolutely right. The way a venture capital fund works is we go out to investors who would invest substantial sums of money into our fund, and then we invest that in companies. And those investors typically are governments, sovereign wealth funds, large corporations, and also what are called family offices. Family offices manage the wealth for ultra-high net worth individuals. And they would see venture capital as a part of their portfolio. Typically, if you look at a pension fund, pension funds will invest in venture capital. They would normally allocate about 5% of the pension fund into venture capital, because they see it as a high-risk investment. Now, in terms of what we do then, is the venture capital model is you invest in startups at particular stages. So we invest at an early stage, and we follow on and continue to invest in the companies that we find at an early stage. There are other venture capital funds that will come in at later stages to help the company. So I'll give you an example. We would invest typically about $500,000 into a company at an early stage, typically partner up with Enterprise Ireland as well, and then with other founders to raise a total investment package for the fund or of the company of about €1 million. So when we go and we identify companies that we're going to invest in, they're early stage, and we want to invest €1 million into them to accelerate their development, to get them to the next stage. And that next stage could be a fundraise of 5 to 10 million euros. And the whole goal of venture capital is to find companies that can grow very, very quickly and very rapidly and become large international companies. And the capital goes in to accelerate their growth. And typically, if you're a venture capital funded business, you will grow very, very quickly over multiple rounds of funding. Then the other thing that venture capital firms bring to the party are contacts, connections, help sourcing executives, for example, for the firm as it grows as well. And of course, experience helping companies through the rapid growth that they will go through. So we invest, our investment area is primarily software, and the area that's particularly relevant to AgTech is the Internet of Things. And in particular, we're interested in companies that help manage the Internet of Things or provide end-to-end solutions in different verticals, and AgTech being one of those. And I think it's a very, very exciting area to invest, because we saw from some of the previous speakers, fantastic new technologies emerging, and those technologies being adopted as well. So I guess coming back to Andrew's point, what we're looking for is a company at a particular stage, and that company will typically have an initial version of their product, and they'll have some initial validation of that product as well, i.e. They've got some initial customers, and if they have those initial customers, they're in our sweet spot, and we'll take a look at the company itself. The final point I'd make is we see ourselves as part of a larger ecosystem. So some of the supports that were spoken about there earlier on, the LEOs, for example, Enterprise Ireland, New Frontiers, and accelerators, those are all critical parts of the ecosystem. And typically we would see ourselves investing in companies that come out of accelerators. Also, I should mention angel networks as well. There's some fantastic things going on in Ireland with angel networks. A brand new European investment fund program to support angel networks as well. So if you think about it in terms of stage of development, companies when they get going might get going through support from the LEOs or New Frontiers, or friends and family, for example, in investing, or the founders of the companies investing in the company. Then they might move on to angel investment, or in parallel to that, accelerators. And then once they come out of the accelerator, or they come out and get further angel investment, or they may be at a stage suitable for us. When they have that initial product and they have that initial market validation, then we're the type of guys who will invest very, very quickly. We'll make a quick decision for the company and invest in them. And then we have a network of partners who we will work with to support the company, to support its growth, and then bring it in for the next round, the €5 million round or the €10 million round. I should say as well, just the London offices, we're part of a larger organisation called Shard Capital. And Shard Capital are a boutique investment house based in the City of London, and as part of that we also have a brokerage in Shard Capital. So what that means is we also do IPOs, so we can help companies access the public markets in the UK, both AIM and the London Stock Exchange, the LSE, and we're actually going through the process right now with one of our first investees that we're bringing him to the public markets to raise substantial funding.
Yeah. And you don't have accelerators as such, just for, you were talking about you feed off accelerators.
We do, but we also partner with them as well. So there is an accelerator that we're working with at the moment, which will be based in the southeast, that will specifically support AgTech as well. I'm not sure whether we're announcing that yet or not.
That's for another day.
Yeah, but we are heavily engaged.
Yeah, because I mean, and it's interesting because we deal with the innovation arena and the ploughing in Enterprise Ireland. I mean, you continually get the ideas and the people, and a lot of them don't realise that there is a structure, a kind of a steps in the ladder to funding, whatever, you know, and they have to prepare themselves. And I might just bring it back to you, Andrew, because I know that's the Yield Lab Accelerator. That's basically, it is just preparing you and your company for the next stage. And I mean, that's what primarily a lot of them do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of buzzword bingo that goes around about what's an accelerator and what's an incubator. And I think there's, I would sort of summarize it as, there's those that are bringing a lot of mentoring to the table, and it's fairly intensive in terms of the time requirement. And then there are those at the other end of the spectrum where if they do mentoring, it's very high quality, and they will fly people in, and it's all about more their contacts. And I would describe Yield Lab as the latter, where this is an accelerator that has been going for, this is the third year, based out of St. Louis, Missouri, which is a big agricultural heartland of the United States of America. They've invested in 15 companies so far over the last 2.5 years, and it's founded by ex-food company executives and agricultural executives who've put their personal money into it and then had that funded by people like pension funds, as Barry mentioned. And then they want to invest in organizations that they think have the potential to have a global impact on sustainability. And that's a key driver. And interestingly, they don't invest if they don't think they can make a big impact themselves through their contacts that they have. And they've just launched in Ireland, and there are 4 companies that have been invested in. So we just started on that program. It's a 6-month program. We meet two days a month, but really high quality.
I might bring you in, Robbie, because I know AgTech started their own new accelerator there, and it was a great success. So I might bring you in just on that, and then you can discuss.
Yeah, so AgTech started an accelerator at the start of the year. We got about 190 applicants, which was a bit surprising to us, but very pleasantly surprised, all over the world. So a lot of representation from places like Australia, lots from the US, Israel, those kind of places. We didn't offer any investment, so no money, and so it attracted a slightly different type of person. And what we found was that most of the people that applied really just wanted mentoring and contacts. I was working, we assigned a mentor from AgTech to each of these companies. In the end, we were working with 12 of them. I was working with a company from Ireland called Maggrow, who are already quite successful and maybe slightly beyond the startup stage. But what they were looking for was simply contacts. And in the end, I think we were able to make quite a big difference to their business. We introduced, for example, Maggrow to big contacts that AgTech has in California, Texas, Spain, South Africa, Canada, a large number of countries to help them with their export program. AgTech, it wasn't clear going into it exactly what AgTech was going to get out of it. I guess that's because we're owned by an entrepreneur himself who sort of, I think he thinks on his feet. But in the end, what was very interesting is that AgTech got quite a lot out of it in terms of learning for some of their senior executives. So each of these companies had a mentor from AgTech, and we worked with those companies and got to understand, I guess, some of the strengths that AgTech has as a company, what we don't have, and you get to see firsthand what the company is doing wrong and how you can help them fix it. So that mentoring thing I don't think should be underestimated, and speaking to a lot of the companies afterwards, it's quite clear that we made quite a difference to their future prospects and even the very short-term prospects in a way that can be quantified in terms of sales. And probably the biggest thing we saw that where, contrasting our business to what they were doing is the ability to sell. And I think, Andrew, you said it. Is it something that the farmer needs, or is it something that the industry needs? Do they understand the chain of command, meaning what the different buying signals or buying motivations are of the different people in the chain? And are we offering each person in that chain the right value proposition? They hadn't thought through, largely that part hadn't been thought through very well. So they were, a lot of these companies were had a great proposition for one small part of that value chain, but they weren't thinking about the full chain. And very often they were all asking the farmer to pay, when quite clearly some of the benefits could accrue to other people in the chain, such as the processors or anywhere in the supply chain. So all in all, quite a big success, and it's something that we definitely will be doing again.
You touched on selling there and having a product to sell. I suppose there was a question I was given that came in from the last session. How do you balance the cost of new technology when the price farmers are getting for product is low or even below productive cost? So this is, I suppose, affordability value and what it returns to farmers. So I see you touched on it there about not just the farmer. I'd be delighted to hear the industry pay for it from, but you touched on that. So expand on that in the context of this question.
Yeah. So when I started at Keenan, we have this great system where we're asking the farmer to pay only. And I think many of the startups are only asking the farmer to pay. AgTech, though, is from industry. And so we sell to industry, who sells to farmer, who sells back to industry, meaning a processor of some sort, who sells again onto a supermarket. So we're all very connected. And so what we've spent a lot of time doing is trying to figure out where the value falls in that chain and bring it all the way back, because AgTech can certainly pay for some of it. Glanbia can pay for some of it. Tesco's, Sainsbury's, all of these companies are getting a benefit, whether it be traceability, environmental, carbon footprint, improved productivity. All of these benefits accrue to the whole chain. And so just targeting the farmer, it's not about being fair, it's really about knowing where we can extract the most value and where we can easiest sell our product. And of course, going back to the selling part of it, the message you give to each of those players is completely different. And each product does have multiple benefits, and so it's a case of figuring out which benefit is appropriate for which member of the chain. And we spent a lot of time this last year doing that.
So, I mean, in the first session, Frank and Mara talked about it's big data, right? You're talking about a big data play, the ICBF owning all that data for really farmers owns it. So is that what you're talking about? You know, who owns the data and how do you get value out of that data?
Yeah, well, I can give you a practical example. We can sell directly to farmer, and the farmer will get value by less wastage, improved performance. We also sell to Sainsbury's, for example, and Sainsbury's pay us purely on traceability. So they give us a lump sum of money to track a certain number of farms. We track them, give the data back. But the value proposition to Sainsbury's is all around traceability. We also work with McDonald's, and that's all around carbon footprinting, because improved productivity means more efficiency, which means a better carbon footprint. So the message is very, very different for each of those.
Perhaps I might start with that. I guess you'd always want to, I'm not personally qualified in the sector of advancing loans, but certainly I have experience of why somebody advances a loan, and that's risk reward. And typically the only people that I'm aware of that do very large time period loans would be nation states, for example, Japan. Who have typically they invest over a 30-year period for long-term strategic projects, and that seems to have stood them in good stead. But they would be looking for, how is my risk covered? What are the assets that cover that risk over that period of time? So I would say it would be very difficult to do that in this country, just as a personal observation. I don't know whether others would have different views.
Yeah, it might be something that ISIF, which is the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Ireland, that they could look at. The challenge is precisely what you're talking there, which is the risk return. But ISIF has a double bottom line mandate, which is to generate economic activity in Ireland in addition to producing a return as well. So I think it would be a good thing for the industry. I mean, if you can advance credit at low interest rates over long periods of time, I think that is a very helpful thing to do. The challenge is what is the organisation that would do it? I think I would agree. I think it's either a government initiative or a sovereign wealth fund initiative.
Was it last year that ICBF lost their mandatory levy on tags, so they did have a funding hole? So I think they are starting to look at other ways of monetising that data for the benefit of farmers and for the industry as well.
Peter, just while you're waiting for the mic to go up, can I give a plug to the research system as well? I never, when I was going through the stages of development of companies, I never plugged either TSSG or the research system. And TSSG actually, and the research system works across all of those stages as well, both from very, very early stage with things like innovation vouchers, all the way to late stage, which is things like innovation partners.
It's for Fabian. What was the biggest challenge for Herdwatch faced and got? Herdwatch faced and got. What was the biggest challenge Herdwatch faced?
Sorry, yeah, it doesn't work, I don't think. The biggest challenge, which is still a challenge, which any company involved in AgTech is or will face, is adoption and speed of adoption of a particular technology, no matter how good it is. And we've worked, we're years doing this now, and there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I'd hope that Herdwatch is a little bit of a beacon for others, in that, we as I said earlier, we have 5,500 farmers who probably upwards of 95% did not use their smartphone to manage their farm beforehand. Some of them might have used it, in terms of using the calendar and, contacts and stuff like that. But so that is the biggest challenge, and it's a challenge we're taking very seriously. And until such time that there is a foothold, a reasonable foothold by any technology inside the farm gates, which these guys are going to tell us about in a few minutes, then I don't think AgTech is relevant, and that's what we're working on. It's all well and good thinking of what's going to happen in 20 years and sensors and all that, but we need to get in. We need to get into the farmers' hands, get these sensors working for them at a price level that they can afford, at a level of usability that makes sense, to people who might be using your technology on the smartphone for the first time. And I'm not saying that farmers are not able to use smartphones. I'm actually one of those people that have been fighting against this urban myth of farmers not being able to use technology. I mean, it's one of those biggest lies ever. But if you're told a lie enough times, you might start to believe it. So that's the biggest challenge, and it will continue to be for a number of years.
Okay. I think unless there's any specific questions, I'm going to move on to the next session now and hear from the farmers as it's built. I just want everyone to put their hands together for a big round of applause.